我们下一个环节呢，这个环节也是我们华人比较不熟悉的，就是我们一直在讲什么叫做传承，什么叫做伦理传承，什么叫做道德传承，怎么样通过我们书写，我们可能华人比较熟悉的是回忆录啊，但是我们不晓得，其实还是可以给你的家人、给你的后代写一些你想告诉他们的话。那我们作为家中的年长者，我们如果在我们自己各方面状况都还很好的时候，我们就开始写这些书信或者文件的话，其实对自己也是非常疗愈、非常有帮助。那这一段的这个，我们看到我们的嘉宾上线 ，Hi Ben，
Oh, hello, Amanda.
welcome, Hi Ben, we see you. So Ben, it's your time.
Oh, thank you so much, Amanda, and thank you, Susan and Stephanie and everyone from hi there, Susan, and thank you everyone from Happy 50plus for having me here today. Oh, cool, Stephanie. So you're going to be doing the slide. Fantastic. So let's get started. I'm going to talk for about 20 minutes or so. Then we're going to have a little writing activity or reflection activity. So if you have a pen nearby, that's great. If not, you can just, think about it. So yeah, let's get going. There will be a little time for questions and answers as well, but if you want to write your questions in the chat, I can take a look at those when we're done. Great. So again, thank you so much for having me here today. My name is Ben Esch, and I'm a therapist in Pasadena, California. I also see clients all throughout the state of California via telehealth. And as a therapist, I work with a lot of different people facing a lot of different challenges like relationship troubles, childhood anxiety, or trauma. But of all my clients, I love working with senior citizens the most. And before I was a therapist, I was a novelist and a journalist, so I really like to use that in my work with clients through therapeutic writing. And in my experience, senior citizens can really benefit from therapeutic writing because it's such a great way to help people reflect on their lives in a more accurate, helpful, and hopefully even enjoyable way. So today I'm going to be speaking with you about a specific type of therapeutic writing called a legacy letter. These are also known as ethical wills. These are powerful documents which can help you reflect on your life and share your wisdom, values, and lessons with future generations of your family. In my opinion, having a document that can connect you to your family in this way is enough of a reason to write a legacy letter. But I'd also like to speak with you about some of the other therapeutic benefits to writing one of these. Because in my experience, it's much easier to start a new practice for your mental health if you can really understand how it can help you beforehand. So, and there are a lot of benefits because writing these documents can help you improve your mental health and can also help you confront the developmental stage that all senior citizens are facing. And that's known as integrity versus despair. The term comes from a psychologist named Erik Erikson, and I'll talk more about him later. But, and also what that stage means. And I know that despair sounds pretty intense. My own parents are in their 70s and they hate the term, but just think of it as a state of regret and sadness. But I hope after our time today, you'll understand what that stage means a little bit more and how legacy letters can help you overcome it. But before I do any of that, I would like to tell you about my Uncle Harry. Next slide, Stephanie. Okay, so before we get going, this man is not really my uncle, and his name isn't Harry either, but the rest of this is true. Because one day a couple years ago, I was talking to my Uncle Harry, and I told him that I was about to start a therapy group for senior citizens to reflect on their lives and write their memoirs. And my Uncle Harry said, well, that's good for them, but I would never do anything like that. So I asked him why, and he said, because I've lived a pretty boring life. Next slide, please. So let me tell you about my Uncle Harry's pretty boring life. Because in his 90 years on this planet, my Uncle Harry has made fortunes and then lost those fortunes and then made fortunes again. He's been married 4 times. He has 6 children. He has more grandchildren than I can count, and those grandchildren are giving him great-grandchildren at a pretty steady clip. He grew up in a small town in Canada and traveled the world ever since. He's lived in Australia and Spain and Peru, and he's had a lot of adventures along the way. I can't tell them all, but just a real quick one. When he was living in Peru, he decided he wanted to float down the Amazon River. So he went down there and he hired a really rickety boat, and he started floating down and soon discovered that the captain of that boat was one of Che Guevara's former lieutenants. And this man really hated Americans and really wanted to kill my Uncle Harry until he found out that Uncle Harry was Canadian, and then all of a sudden he had a new best friend. And even at 90 years old, my Uncle Harry continues to play golf, some of the worst golf I've ever seen, by the way, and somehow still wins money from me every time we play. And yet, when my Uncle Harry reflected on his 90 years on this planet, all of those adventures and romances and accomplishments, this is what he thought. I've lived a pretty boring life. Next slide, please. Now, personally, I think my Uncle Harry was wrong. I think he's led a full and fascinating and amazing life. And I think there's a lot of evidence that agrees with me as well. So why was my Uncle Harry so wrong when he thought about his life? I mean, I don't think he was lying. I don't think he was having an issue with his memory either. In my professional opinion, I think my Uncle Harry was simply confronting the developmental stage of integrity versus despair, and he was having a really hard time. And my Uncle Harry isn't alone in this, because unfortunately, the developmental stage of integrity versus despair is not a fair fight. Next slide, please. So this dapper gentleman you see on your screen there is Erik Erikson. And I'm sure many of you remember this from some of your psychology classes in college, but let me just give you a brief overview of who he is and what his stages mean. So Erik Erikson was a prominent figure in psychology, especially developmental psychology. And he came up with a way of looking at the entire lifespan through a series of 8 developmental stages. Now, each of these stages has a different challenge that's associated with it. So, let's start when we're first born, when we're babies. The challenge that we face is a question of trust versus mistrust. Can we trust our parents? Can we trust our environments? Can we basically feel safe? And if we do well in that stage, we develop a sense of trust of the world. And if we have a harder time in that stage, we develop a sense of mistrust, and we might feel unsafe in the world. These stages continue throughout our lives. When we're in, high school age, it's, can we develop a sense of identity, or are we going to have role confusion? When we're in our 20s, it's, can we find intimacy with a romantic partner, or are we going to feel a sense of isolation? These stages continue all the way along until we reach 60 years old and we hit the final stage, which personally I think is the most interesting and challenging stage of all. And that's integrity versus despair. This is also the longest stage that we're in, because it starts at 60 and it lasts all the way until we die. That can be a really long time. So let me tell you a little bit more about this stage and why it's so challenging. And this will all be leading to why legacy letters can help. So according to Erik Erikson, this stage is, quote, a retrospective accounting of one's life to date, where one decides how much one embraces life as having been well lived, as opposed to regretting missed opportunities. If we are able to reflect on our experiences and we feel like we have led a worthy and fulfilling life, we experience what Erikson calls ego integrity, or, quote, accepting one's one and only life cycle as something that had to be. And people who do not do so well during this stage are said to experience despair, that deep sense of regret and sadness when they reflect upon their lives. And unfortunately, a lot of people are in this state of despair. People like my Uncle Harry. Next slide, please. So, what makes this stage so hard? Why do so many people like my Uncle Harry feel a sense of despair when they reflect upon their lives, even after they've experienced these incredible, exciting, and fulfilling lives? Frankly, why are we so bad at remembering who we are and what we did and why? I have some ideas. And the first one is this: we are inexperienced at self-reflection. Not everyone, of course. There's a lot of artists and writers and therapists who have spent a lot of time reflecting on their lives. Speaking both as a writer and a therapist, we might even do this a little bit too much. But let's think about other people with other professions. Let's think about my Uncle Harry. He was a mining engineer, and being deeply reflective about your past and your feelings doesn't exactly help you when you work at a mine. I briefly worked at a mine myself when I was in high school, so I can tell you this one from experience. And in every one of Erikson's other stages, our developmental task is dependent on how we interact with other people. Can we feel a sense of trust and safety with our parents? Can we develop a sense of identity with our peers? Can we find love with another person? But during the stage of integrity versus despair, the rules completely change. For the first time in all of the developmental stages, with no prior warning, the challenge shifts from how well we interact with other people to how well we can make peace with ourselves, our decisions, and our past. For many of us, we have never done this type of self-reflective work before, and for a first-time activity, the stakes are unreasonably high. We are walking on a tightrope for the very first time, and if we stumble, we risk falling into despair. Sounds pretty hard, right? Personally, I think it's a rigged game. But just wait, there's a few other challenges that make this stage even harder. Let's talk about negativity bias. There's a more scientific way to explain this, but I like to explain it with this example. So I want you to, put yourself in the shoes of your long, long ago ancestors. We're talking caveman days. And I want you to imagine as a caveman, you're out in the forest and you're looking for berries, foraging for berries. And in that particular forest, there are 10 berries. 9 of them taste pretty good, and one of those berries is poisonous and will kill you and your family and everyone you have ever loved. Now, think about that caveman. Which berry are you going to pay most attention to? Which berry are you going to remember? Our brains are hardwired to pay more attention to negativity because negativity helps keep us safe. And while this is helpful now and was extremely helpful for your caveman ancestors, it doesn't exactly help you when you're trying to reflect on your life experiences. I'm not saying that we should ignore the negative events in our past, right? I mean, I don't think I'd have a job if everyone simply ignored what was hard, tragic, or traumatic in their past. But I don't believe our brain needs extra help looking for that negative either. We're hardwired to look for the poison berries already. So when we reflect on our past, it stands to reason that we're going to see a lot of negative. We're going to see a lot of what our brain is hardwired to see, and that's the negativity, the poison berries. We need some extra help and maybe some extra focus to look past those poison berries and remember what else was happening in our past. Unfortunately, negativity bias isn't the only factor making the stage so challenging. There's also memory problems, with conditions like dementia impacting 1 in 10 people over 65 and half of people over 85. So the work of this stage is reflecting and remembering. And if you already have something that's making remembering difficult, it's going to be even harder for you. Also, we have new roles, the challenges of adjusting to new roles and living situations, including assisted living facilities, which have been shown to lead to a loss of identity, self-esteem, and an increase in depression. And while we're talking about depression, that's one of the most common mental health concerns impacting senior citizens. And we've already discussed how the negativity bias can impact how we recall past events, but depression does the same thing as well. When we're depressed, it can weaken our recall of positive events and strengthen our recall of negative ones. When you put all these factors together, it makes sense why so many senior citizens have trouble with the stage of integrity versus despair. It even makes sense why my Uncle Harry might feel despair about his life instead of the ego integrity that he has earned through a life well lived. And, just to brighten things up here a little bit, this stage is challenging and unfair, but is far from impossible. I think we just need a little extra help. And that's why I specialize in working with senior citizens, because I want to give that help. And like I said before, therapeutic writing, like legacy letters, can be a fantastic way to accomplish this. Next slide, please. So, what is a legacy letter and how can it help? Next slide, please. I'm sure many of you today have already written your legal will. And with that legal will, you have a document that outlines your wishes for how your physical possessions will be transferred to the next generation. And that's really important to do that. If you haven't done it, I'm not a lawyer, but I'd encourage you to look into doing that. But what about all of the experience, knowledge, and perspective that you have accumulated throughout your lives as well? What about those treasures? Sadly, for many people, this invaluable wisdom is lost forever when they die. To combat this problem, ethical wills were created. These documents, also known as legacy letters, originated in the Jewish faith, with the oldest example of an ethical will being found in the year 1050. There's no set format to writing an ethical will, but Rabbi Steve Leder utilizes 12 questions to structure this document in his book, For You When I'm Gone. And these questions range from what makes a good person to what got you through your greatest challenge. And they help you to deeply consider the challenges and triumphs of your life and share the wisdom you have earned through these experiences. Now, as I already mentioned, I think that just having a document that shares this information with future generations is enough of a reason to write one of these. But that's far from the only benefit. Let's talk about a few of the other ones. Next slide, please. So, let's talk about reflection. Everyone that's in this Zoom call today possesses a brain. And anyone who possesses a brain knows that brains are fantastic at producing thoughts and producing feelings. At times, it can be a bit overwhelming how many thoughts and feelings our brains produce. And this morning, we've been talking about, things like death and end-of-life care and legacy and depression, very light and breezy topics for a Wednesday morning. So I would assume that your brain has been producing a lot of thoughts and feelings right now. And I would guess that some of them have been a bit challenging. When I think about these thoughts and feelings, I like to imagine them like buzzing insects. Some of them are beautiful butterflies and some of them are hornets, but there's always a lot of them buzzing around. And there's a certain point where there are too many butterflies, where there's a scary amount of butterflies, right? These thoughts and feelings can be overwhelming and frightening at times. But what if you wanted to study one of those particular thoughts or feelings? Like, how would you study one of those insects out of the swarm? I mean, it's pretty hard to examine them while they're still, flying around and pestering you, right? And there's a reason why bug scientists don't run around the jungle with tiny microscopes. No, when a scientist wants to study an insect, they catch it, they stick a pin through it, and they put it on a piece of paper. Because whether it's majestic or terrifying or poisonous, an insect is a lot easier to examine when it's standing still. Therapeutic writing, like legacy letters, allows you to do the same thing with the buzzing thoughts that surround you. When you write about those thoughts and feelings and beliefs and judgment, when you stick a pin through it and you actually put it on paper, you can really get a good look at them for what they really are. Now, they might be beautiful and they might be scary, but no matter what, they will be easier to understand when they're on paper. This is the work of self-reflection, and self-reflection is the work of integrity versus despair. Let's talk about a few other benefits. We already mentioned some of the benefits of connection, but I want to give you a bit of a real-life example to hopefully hit the point home. Because this document isn't just for your children. This is for your grandchildren and your grandchildren's grandchildren. And personally, Of my 4 grandparents, 3 of them were already dead by the time I was born, and my only living grandfather, he passed away when I was very young. Of course, my parents told me stories about them. I saw some pictures and a few videos, and I even have a few memories of my grandfather, but I can't say that I ever really knew any of them. And I'm not saying that having legacy letters written by them would have changed any of that. But I am saying that it would have given me an insight into their lives and their character and their wisdom. And I think it could have given me support and comfort and guidance when I faced challenges in my own life. I really wish my grandparents would have given me the gift of a legacy letter. And if you can, I would encourage you to give this gift to your own families. And we'll talk more about how you can do that specifically very soon. Additional benefits for writing legacy letters or therapeutic writing is improved mental health. Studies have found that remembrance and life review therapies, which are very similar to writing legacy letters, led to a variety of mental health benefits. They've been shown to decrease isolation and increase specific memory in senior citizens. And, this probably won't come as much of a surprise, but they've also been shown to decrease depression and increase awareness of emotions and moods for senior citizens as well, which all help the process of easing identity integration for this new role in your lives. In light of all these benefits, it stands to reason why therapeutic writing is increasingly being utilized in one of the most emotionally challenging periods of all, and that's end of life and palliative care. Next slide, please. So you've heard me talk about legacy letters for quite a while now, but how about we give writing one a bit of a shot so you can experience it for yourselves? So I've taken this question from Rabbi Leader's book about ethical wills that I mentioned, For You When I'm Gone. This is a picture of Rabbi Leader right there. Very nice man. He's had an opportunity to speak with him, and he's been incredibly supportive. And for the next few minutes, I'd like you to reflect on this question from his book. If you feel like writing an answer, please do so. If you would like to take notes, that's great as well. But even if you just want to think about the question, you're still doing the work of integrity versus despair. And the question is this: how do you want to be remembered? Please take a minute or two, and then we'll finish up the talk. Thanks. That's really beautiful, Stella. If anyone else would feel comfortable writing their answers in the chat, that'd be fine as well, but it's entirely up to you. Take about 20 more seconds here. Okay, so thank you for taking the time to do that. I really appreciate it. And I'd like you to think about what that experience was like for you. I want you to think about the thoughts and memories and feelings and beliefs that occurred when you were thinking about how your answer to that particular question. And I want you to think about how sharing those thoughts and feelings might help the other members of your family, the future generations of your family that are here now and are going to be born in the future. And I also want you to think about how reflecting on questions like these could help you right here and right now. Now, typically when I do this kind of work with senior citizens, I play some music, and I had a Beatles song all queued up and ready to go, but I know this is going on YouTube, and YouTube is really intense about playing the copyrighted music, and I didn't want anybody to get in trouble here. But, I just want you to really consider doing that if you decide to continue writing legacy letters, because music plays a very interesting role in how we remember things. It has a way of transporting us to a different time and place in our lives. And if you decide to write a legacy letter, and again, I really hope you do, please try listening to music from different periods of your life when you're writing. I think you might be surprised by the effect it has on what you remember and how you remember it. And just a quick side note here, if you do happen to know anyone who is experiencing a memory issue like dementia, and based on some of the statistics that we talked about earlier, unfortunately, that's very likely, I'd really like you to consider looking into music therapy for them. There's an incredibly powerful documentary called Alive Inside, and this is also spoken about in a book by Oliver Sacks called Musicophilia. But music therapy has just shown tremendous benefit in these people, kind of accessing memories and feelings, even with pretty severe cases of dementia. But again, I just wanted to drop a note about that since we're in this area. Next slide, please. Okay, so what are some next steps? If you're interested in writing a legacy letter, I would really encourage you to pick up Rabbi Steve Leader's book, For You When I'm Gone, widely available, and there's an audiobook written by, narrated by Rabbi Leader, and it is just fantastic. Now, if I think Rabbi Leader is fantastic and I love the book, but if I had one critique of it, is that I think he might overestimate how easy it is to actually write about your past experiences and reflect on your emotions and put words down on the paper. Speaking as a writer, writing is hard. So if you would like some additional help, I would encourage you to reach out to a therapist in your area who specializes in therapeutic writing or working with senior citizens or life review therapy. If you happen to live in California, I am a therapist who specializes in all of those things, and I would be happy to speak with you if you would like to see if working together would be beneficial for you. Additionally, I will be starting a legacy letter writing workshop for senior citizens very soon. And if you'd like more information about that, please visit my website, beneschtherapy.com, or reach out to me via the email or number you will see very soon here. Next slide, please. Okay, now we've reached the portion for questions. I know we're getting kind of close to noon, but let me check the chat, or if anybody would like to, let me check the chat first, but if anybody would like to unmute themselves, we can do that as well. So looking in the chat, how do we overcome the many feelings of regrets in our final stage? That is a fantastic question. Thank you, Susan. I think there's not an easy answer to that in my opinion, but I think work like reflective therapy, journaling can be very helpful in that. And I would also say working with a therapist, if you would be open to that as well, could be a really good way to talk about those feelings of regret. There are many different therapies. I think acceptance and commitment therapy is a really helpful one when we reflect on our lives and we, try to address those feelings in a more helpful way. But I would say that it's not necessarily an easy answer to that question, but there is a process to overcoming those feelings of regret. And I think it can be a really fulfilling experience. I would encourage you to get some help with that, though, because it can be a bit challenging. So, reach out to a mental health professional or religious leader or whoever it is that you feel comfortable speaking with that can help you sort through those feelings. Are there any other questions? Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's a fantastic question, Amanda. Yes, I have. Like I said before, depression is very, very common with senior citizens, and it's kind of understandable why. I have had the opportunity to work with some senior citizens who are experiencing depression. And, it could be a variety of factors, but I really do feel like the therapeutic writing that we've done together has been helpful in them shifting their perspective, or it can be helpful for them to reevaluate some of these judgments that they've made about themselves and their past and really kind of put them into a context that's more helpful. But the short answer to your question is yes, I have had the opportunity and the privilege of working with senior citizens who are experiencing depression. And I have observed and heard from them that their depression was decreased due to the, I think in large part due to the work that they did in reflecting on their lives through therapeutic writing. Okay, well, we're just right at the end here. If we could just pop to that next slide for a second. So here's some of my information. If anybody would like to reach out to me, beneschtherapy.com or benesch.therapy@gmail.com, and that's my number right there. I have an office in Pasadena. I see clients in person there, and I see clients throughout the state of California on telehealth. If I can be helpful in any way, if I can connect you to a therapist, if I can connect you to a Mandarin speaking therapist or a Cantonese speaking therapist, I know a few of them, please feel free to reach out, and it would be my honor and privilege to help you with that. But speaking of honors and privileges, it has been such an honor and privilege to speak with you all today. Thank you so much to everyone at Happy 50 Plus for having me. And I just appreciate you all. Thank you so much.